Hey everyone! In a previous video, we talked about and introduced the Universal DevOps Framework. And what we talked about is that when it comes to implementing a DevOps framework, there's a lot of very common core components that go into making that framework successful for an organization. So what we came up with is we kind of took all of those pieces and bundled it into this framework that we have in front of us. We're being able to manage the platform as code, managing the security around those platforms, and the various things that can make up everything about deploying an application from start to finish. One of the most common pieces that we talk about and that really has the biggest impact for organizations is really specifically the pipeline framework. Now again, that's just one piece of the entire framework, but it is super powerful because it allows you to automate a lot of those core components, automate a lot of the processes and tasks that you have within your environment, and give you a standard framework in order to do that. So it's really a set of comprehensive and automated framework that allows us to sort of deploy all the things inside of the environment. So if we take this individual piece, this individual pipeline framework, and start to click through this piece, we can really start to see exactly what this looks like. So really, when we look at this pipeline framework specifically, we're kind of looking at the four components that you see in front of you. So the first one is really the base YAML. So all of the pipeline automation, the pipeline development we do, a lot of the previous tools and even Azure DevOps, VSTS back in the day, they had a lot of the GUI-based designers. If you're still using the GUI-based designer, now is definitely a time to move away from that, even to the point where Azure DevOps will tell you that's a security risk if you're using the classic integrations for pipelines. So the base YAML is really your opportunity to give your pipeline authors the ability to develop the pipelines they need, which is so great about this framework and great about what Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions can do for you is it allows you to give one place where pipeline authors and developers, they can go in and write the code that they need. So when it comes to authoring a pipeline, you want the pipeline authors to be able to have the flexibility that they need to be able to create the pipelines that they need. What tasks do they need? How is the application built? How is the application packaged? How is it deployed? The developers, of course, are going to be the ones that have all of that information. What variables do they need? What environments do they need to connect to? All of the different parameters that need to go in there. That is all part of that base YAML, which then lives inside of the code repository that your developers have access to. That makes up the first core component of the pipeline framework, which is really that base YAML. So the second component of this is now the extension YAML. The extension YAML is really platform owner managed. Now what that means for any given organization is really dependent on your organization. Some of these really big organizations, the companies that are really big, you can really start to divide your platform almost by project so that individual business units have their own projects or their own orgs that they control in GitHub. It just kind of varies. Or if you're sort of a smaller organization, you can then have platform owners that manage the entire org and then possibly everybody lives inside of a single project. So it all kind of depends, and we'll talk a lot about that as we talk about the platform management aspects of the Universal DevOps Framework. So what the extension YAML allows you to do is while the authors are developing the base YAML and all the tasks that they have and everything that needs to get done, is they then have to extend an extension YAML in order to be able to run a pipeline. These two have to work together. Now it doesn't necessarily mean there's two files, but there can be, but there is a minimum of two files that make up a pipeline and quite possibly much more depending on how you divide up the code. So an extension YAML is really the ability of the platform owner to provide a very controlled mechanism so that developers can then insert the tasks that they need. However, the platform owners can then manage exactly how those tasks get run. So they can control what environments you can deploy to, what are the credentials or secrets or tokens or anything it needs to authenticate, how those are controlled, any sort of approvals that need to come into play, and then also any additional steps that you want to insert as part of that process then also gets included as part of the extension YAML. For example, you're using GitHub Advanced Security and you want to be able to scan the code, but you don't want to rely on the developers remembering to put that as part of their pipelines or anything else, any other standard steps. For example, one of the common steps that we'll talk about in the pipeline task framework is this retain objects job, which allows you to say anytime a GitHub action or an ADO pipeline runs and has a successful deployment to production, you can then run this task and it will go ahead and retain all the necessary objects so you can have full traceability from start to end, which does not come out of box in the standard configurations of ADO or GitHub. So those types of tasks, you can insert them into the extension YAML, and that allows you to be able to ensure that every single pipeline is then running the necessary steps that it needs to. So this is a really beautiful line of alignment versus autonomy, where you are giving the autonomy to the developers to develop the pipelines that they need in the base YAML, but then you are giving them alignment at the same time, where you are making sure you are controlling the environment, controlling the security, the approvals, and all of the credentials that go into that pipeline. This is sort of the foundation and the core of this pipeline framework, is having that two divisions of those pieces. Now we're going to dive into each of these pieces as we go along into separate videos. We're going to dive into each component of the UDF pipeline framework so you can see exactly what this looks like inside of ADO and GitHub. So the third one is the task framework. So if actually we go back, you'll see that the pipeline task framework is even its own thing. So the pipeline task framework is really a whole framework in itself of how these tasks are run, what they look like, what the standard template is, and how those then get inserted inside of the actual pipeline framework itself. So these tasks are super powerful and important to the pipeline framework. It connects right inside of it. So it's really this flexible framework where you can automate any task. So we really love to use PowerShell. If there's anything, and that's not the only language that you have to use, but PowerShell is super nice. It's super powerful. It allows you to take anything with an API, an SDK, anything that you can automate or script in PowerShell. Those become inserted as tasks that the pipeline can run, and then you can package those, and they become deployable units themselves, so that as you make changes to these tasks, you can version those, and then different pipeline authors can use different versions, and as you release different versions that may have breaking changes, you're not impacting the other pipelines that are using an older version. So that is super important how we write those tasks, and we'll look at that specifically once we get into the pipeline task framework of the Universal DevOps. So the last one is execution. So when it comes to all of this, where we have our base YAML, we have our extension YAML, and we have all the tasks that we're running, we have a standardized logging and alerting framework of how all of those pipelines, when they run inside of that execution environment, that you know exactly what's going on there. It's logging in a consistent way. It's logging to a place that is queryable. It can turn on any sort of alerting that you want using a tool like Azure Log Analytics and Azure Monitor. You can see exactly what you need to in terms of these pipelines, alert the appropriate teams if you need to. Now you can build those directly into the pipeline themselves, or as part of the standard framework, you actually bring those pieces along. And so this is also sort of in concert with the agent framework. So if we kind of go back, you'll see that all of these are listed as blue because they're all part of the pipeline sort of framework itself into one. So really the agent framework, that's where all of these components run, and we're going to talk specifically in future videos about the pipeline agent framework, how you manage that, what's the importance of automated and ephemeral agents. So all of that execution environment is part of that, but then in addition to, it's how we log, how we alert, and then how can we test and troubleshoot pipelines. So this is always a common ask, and sometimes very difficult, is you say, we have a pipeline that's in production that's failing. Well, the developers don't have access to the credentials, and most likely those managing the pipelines in the platform environment don't know the credentials. And if you're using an automated means to manage those credentials, which you should, no one's going to have access to these credentials. The system is automatically managing however you're using to authenticate. So how do we test this? So really built into this framework is a very easy, streamlined way where you can test and troubleshoot these pipelines without impacting live pipelines that are in production. So how do you make that process easy? How do you make it accessible? How can you test the pipeline end to end using much of the same pieces that are there? Because many times the error might actually be something wrong with the account itself, or possibly whatever that the task is doing. So what we're going to do over the next few weeks is we're going to take and we're going to start to break them down into their individual pieces. We're going to step into Azure DevOps and GitHub, and we're going to start to set up some of these pipelines so you can see exactly how this framework looks like, exactly how it's built. We'll build it right from scratch, and you can see exactly what that looks like and how that can be successful for you. So we would love to hear from you. How do you develop pipelines? If this kind of aligns to how you're developing pipelines already, or what's important to you in any pipeline framework, what you would like to see. So we'd love to hear your feedback. Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you're interested to hear more about the Universal DevOps Framework, we'd love to have you and learn more together. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.